Megastorm could turn California into a 300-mile-long ocean with $725 billion worth of damage. This is, of course, having to do with the atmospheric river, and this has happened before, about 150 years ago. We're talking about Sacramento. It turned the whole area of California 300 miles lake. It was raining for about 25 days, 23 inches of rain for 6 months. It happened, and it could happen again. Not only because of the atmospheric river, but also because of decaying dams that could leave parts of California in paths of rare megastorm destruction. For example, a combination of freak weather and decaying infrastructure could see dozens of cities in Los Angeles area washed away by 20 feet of floodwater. Army engineers pleaded with the federal government to avert the crisis. Drought-stricken California seems an unlikely place for a flood of biblical proportions, but it has already seen such a thing. U.S. Geological Survey has repeatedly warned that a rare storm event known as the ARC storm, atmospheric river, ARC for short, an ARC storm could dump unprecedented amounts of flood water into the Central Valley, causing, well, at least $300 billion worth of property damage, triggering evacuation of millions of residents. The storm is known as the 900-year storm, not because it happens every 900 years, but because it has a 1 in 900 chance of happening every year. A similar storm took place in 1861. It dumped 36 inches, and I made a mistake, I thought it was 25. 36 inches of rain on Los Angeles. It rendered it impossible to cross the Central Valley without a boat. People had to row themselves to their homes to get in through the second-story windows. Eventually, what they did was, for example, from Sacramento, they moved the capital to San Francisco. It was from one end of California to the other. Some scientists now argue that climate change has made a return of such a storm, the ARC storm, even more likely, and that the Golden State of California has to prepare itself. The chances of seeing another flood of that magnitude over the next 40 years is a 50-50 chance. That's astonishing. UCLA climate scientist Daniel Swain told the LA Times, 50-50 chance in the next 40 years. Now, it did a lot of destruction at that time, and it wasn't the state wasn't even that populated at that time. North of Los Angeles, one aging dam is standing between the predicted flood and millions of people living below it. It's the Whittier Narrows Dam. It holds back floodwater from much of Los Angeles County, and according to the recent U.S. Army Corps of Engineers USACE report, it is in poor condition and would be ill-equipped to handle this type of a storm. Unusually heavy rain could sweep over its lip or even erode the soil beneath the dam, and that would cause it to crumble, causing the catastrophic failure. Now, even if the dam did hold firm, heavy rain could trigger an opening in its spillway, unleashing 20 times more water than the dam downstream channel could hold, and the result would be very significant loss of life and economic impact. Now, the UCACS asked the government for $600 million in funding to upgrade the dam, so to me, in my mind, they should immediately give that and take care of it. The repair is slated for completion in 2026. Meanwhile, a separate UC Irving study concluded that as many as 13 dams in California need this type of an upgrading. Now, as far as this type of a megastorm, ARC storm, turning California into a 300-mile-long ocean, as we said, there's a 50-50 chance from what USGS scientists are saying that it could happen in the next 40 years. It could drown towns and cities in up to 20 feet of water when it starts, and it would be very fast. The last time it happened, people had to scurry up the hill, higher up. Some didn't, of course, save their lives. Some didn't make it. Experts are preparing for such a freak weather so severe it could open up the 300-mile-long ocean across the Golden State. San Francisco, Sacramento, San Jose, all the way down to Los Angeles, as you can see. Now, the last time this happened, 1861, the rain lasted for 45 days. It caused huge rivers to run down the Sierra Nevada mountains, flooding the area even more. Torrents swept away entire towns. A quarter of the Californian cattle was swept away. Out of 800,000 head, 200,000 had been lost. Flooding opens up the 300-mile inland sea throughout Southern California, Central California. This is what happened in 1861, what was called the Great Flood. They say deposits in California's soil show that the state is hit by such an extreme flooding every 200 years. This is according to USGS. The effects could reach the severity of the big San Andreas earthquakes, according to U.S. Geological Survey. In centuries past, these floodwaters turned California's Central Valley into an inland sea. The 19th century disaster of 1861, the Great Flood, swept away entire towns following the 45 days of non-stop torrential rain. The flooding lasted there for 6 months. And we're going to have what a geologist wrote to his brother on the East Coast. The geologist was in the area, and he kept writing to his brother on the East Coast as to what he was witnessing. But that's a little bit later on. This was triggered by an atmospheric river, an arc storm. The large concentration of water vapor in 1861, the storm is among the worst in the state's history. The rivers running down the Sierra Nevada mountains turned it into a deadly torrent, and that's what caused the inland lake. The city of Sacramento drowned to up to 10 feet of brown, debris-filled, dirty water. As we said, it was so high that residents had to row up to the second-story windows to enter their homes. The flooding bankrupted the state. It destroyed the ranching industry, drowning 200,000 heads of cattle from the 800,000. This is according to Dr. Lucy Jones, who is an expert at the U.S. Geological Survey. This is what she said back in 2013. Dr. Lucy Jones has been helping us and disclosing and informing us of what was going on in these past quakes in the Ridgecrest area, and having to do with not at all mitigating the pressure that we're expecting to be released by the southern portion of the San Andreas around the Los Angeles area. The same Dr. Lucy Jones, yes. So the 1861-62, because this is what happened. This started in December 1861. It was hit by the massive arc storm, and the Golden State saw nonstop rain for 45 days, and the Central Valley, California, at that time became an inland sea of 300 miles. The Sacramento River reached a level of 22 feet 7 inches above flood level, and this left Sacramento under 10 feet of water. Estimated 200,000 head of cattle. Of the total, 800,000 cattle had drowned. Dr. Lucy Jones warns that the catastrophic storm of 1861, the Great Flood, is not a one-off. She says, quote, "We have geological evidence through flood deposits that even bigger storms than 1861 happened about once every 300 years. Since we have 6 events in 1,800 years of geological record," Jones said the USGS Core Coast podcast in 2011, and that means that every 300 years we will have a mega flood like this, a megastorm. This goes again with the 300-year cyclical events of the mega quakes that they expect North, Middle, and South San Andreas fault to be hitting. The last mega quake, for example, in the San Francisco area was in the year 1700 that caused the ghost tsunami to hit Japan. Well, now we're overdue for that one. And we're also overdue with the very strange earthquake drought, the hiatus in the southern portion of the San Andreas, and it causes the geologists to be very stressed, anxious about what is going on, because they expected at least in this period of time that they've had this hiatus, at least 6 major quakes over 7 magnitude on the San Andreas, and they have not happened. Something very strange is going on underneath, they say. But going back to this with the mega floods, the extreme floods can cause as much destruction as a hurricane, according to Dr. Lucy Jones. She says these storms have the potential of hurricanes, or even more so because they go on for weeks. Now, according to the recent USGS research and analysis, the great flood of the storm of 1861 severity lasted 23 days and has the same annual likelihood of occurring as a 7.8 magnitude earthquake. Floods caused by the outbreak would result in 3 times the loss in damage, is around 600 and some odd billion dollars, about over $700 billion. There's no evidence right now that a megastorm is going to hit California in the immediate future, but the effects would be devastating due to modern dams and flood control systems that would not be as severe as they were 150 years ago, when the state was, of course, not this populated. So now, according to what the letter found by, which is here, I'll leave a link below for you for this, it's on Scientific American, concerning this 1861, the farmers and ranchers were praying for rain after 2 dry decades. Wow, 20 years of drought, you can imagine. And in December of 1861, their prayers were answered, with a vengeance though, because a series of monster Pacific storms, the arc storms, slammed one after another, slammed one after another into the west coast of North America from Mexico to Canada, the atmospheric river storms. The storms produced the most violent flooding residents had ever seen before or since. Now, this reminds us of what happened this year. Remember that we've had tremendous droughts in California for many years. The NASA satellite images were showing us tremendous drought devastation throughout the Golden State. And this past year, 2019, they had record flooding. Not only there, but in the Midwest, in the breadbasket in the United States, and which caused the tremendous devastation of agriculture. First, it started with the extended snowstorms, and then with the incoming rains, and now with the extended heat, with the tremendous heat. It's amazing that the farmers ever even planted anything. But going back to this, 66 inches of rain fell in Los Angeles that year. 66 inches. More than 4 times the normal annual amount, and it caused rivers to surge over their banks, spreading muddy water for miles across this arid, droughted landscape. Large brown lakes formed in the normal dry plains between Los Angeles and the Pacific Ocean, even covering vast areas of the Mojave Desert. And around Anaheim, flooding in the Santa Ana River created an inland sea 4 feet deep. It stretched up for 4 miles from the river, lasting 4 weeks. Residents in Northern California, where most of the state's 500,000 people lived, at that time, we're talking about 1861, were having to put up with devastation and suffering of their own. In early December, the Sierra Nevada experienced a series of cold Arctic storms, dumping 10 to 15 feet of snow. Doesn't that remind you of what happened this year with the tremendous snow and cold, and we even had the cattle frozen in there with their little feet into the snow? Anyway, that they had to take them out with plows. So this is basically what happened at that time. And these were soon followed by the warm atmospheric river storms, the series of warm storms swelling the rivers, raging the Sierra Nevada range that became raging torrents, and sweeping away entire communities. Now, let's go back to the letter. The water reached up to a depth of 30 feet in those areas. And the towns, the horse cattle washing away houses, buildings, barns, fences, bridges, you can imagine. 30 feet. 30 feet. Completely submerging telegraph poles that had been just installed between San Francisco and New York, causing transportation and communications to completely break down over much of the state for a month. Now, William Brewer wrote a series of letters to his brother on the East Coast describing the surreal scenes of the tragedy that he witnessed during his travels in the region that winter and spring. And this is what he describes. Dated January 31st, 1862. This is what Brewer wrote to his brother. Thousands of farms are entirely underwater, cattle starving and drowning. All the roads in the middle of the state are impassable, so all mails are cut off. The telegraph also does not work clear through. In the Sacramento Valley, for some distance, the tops of the poles are underwater. The entire valley was a lake extended from the mountains on one side to the coast range hills on the other. Steamers ran back over the ranches 14 miles from the river, carrying stock, etc., to the hills. Nearly every house and farm over this immense region is gone. America has never before seen such desolation by flood as this has been, and seldom has the old world seen the like, meaning, of course, what happened from his historic knowledge of Europe, perhaps. Brewer describes a great sheet of brown rippling water extending from the coast of Sierra Nevada to Sierra Nevada, and 1/4 of the state's cattle drowned, marking the beginning of the end of the cattle-based ranchero society in California. 1/3 of the state's property destroyed, 1 home in 8 destroyed completely or carried away by the flood waters. Sacramento, 100 miles up the Sacramento River from San Francisco, was and still is a precarious location at the confluence of the Sacramento and American rivers. In 1861, the city was in many ways a hub, a young state sparkling new capital, an important commercial agricultural center, and the terminus for stagecoach, wagon trains, Pony Express, riverboats from San Francisco. Although floods in Sacramento were not unknown, the residents, nothing could have prepared them for what the deluge brought for them. Now, let's go back to Brewer visiting the city on March 9. This was after his January letter to his brother. 3 months after the flood began, he described the scene. Such a desolation scene I hope never to see again. Most of the city is still underwater and has been there for 3 months. A part is out of the water, that is, the streets are above water, but every low place is full. Cellars, yards are full, houses and walls wet, everything uncomfortable. No description that I can write will give you any adequate conception of the discomfort and wretchedness this must give rise to. I took a boat and 2 boys, and we rowed about for an hour or two. Houses, stores, stables, everything were surrounded by water. Yards were ponds enclosed by dilapidated, muddy, slimy fences. Household furniture, chairs, tables, sofas, fragments of houses were floating in the muddy water or lodged in nooks and corners. I saw 3 sofas floating in different yards. The basements of the better class of houses were half full of water, and through the windows one could see chairs, tables, bedspreads, etc., afloat. Through the windows of the schoolhouse I saw the benches and desks afloat. Over most of the city, boats are still the only way of getting around. The new capital is far out in the water. The governor's house stands as in a lake. Churches, public buildings, private buildings, everything are wet or in the water. Not a road leading from the city is passable. Business is at a dead standstill. Everything looks forlorn and wretched. Many houses have partially toppled over. Some have been carried from their foundations. Several streets, now avenues of water, are blocked up with houses that have floated in them. Dead animals lie about here and there, a dreadful picture. I don't think the city will ever rise from the shock. I don't see how it can. Now, a lot of people here have been, at that time, of course, caught off guard by these floods. and it remains a mystery, but clearly the immigrants did not recognize the climactic warning signs. They never experienced such flooding in the 12 years since the gold rush had begun. Although lesser floods were not uncommon, it appears that the Native American populations who had lived in the region for thousands of years had deeper insights to the weather and hydrology and recognized patterns that resulted in devastating floods. A piece in the Nevada City Democrat describes the Native American response to the Great Flood of 1861. This is what their response was, dated January 11, 1862, in the Nevada City Democrat. We are informed that the Indians living in the vicinity of Marysville left their abodes a week or more ago for the foothills, predicting an unprecedented overflow. See, they had predicted that they were going to have a great flood. They told the whites that the water would be higher than it has been for 30 years and pointed high up on the trees and houses where it would come. You see, that's amazing. They knew how high it would be. The Valley Indians have traditions that the water occasionally rises 15 or 20 feet higher than it has been at any time since the country was settled by whites, and as they live in the open air and watch closely all the weather indications, it's not improbable that they may have better means than the whites of anticipating a great storm. So the specific weather pattern that the Native Americans of the West recognized and knew would bring huge, severe floods is once again understood today. The powerful storm originating in the warm, most tropical Pacific Ocean. Recent research describes these storms as the atmospheric rivers, and they often result in the worst floods, not only in the American West, but across the globe. Now, this here, though, does not at all say how it is that the American Indians knew that they would have at that point in time, at that exact point in time, the Great Flood. And a couple of weeks before it came, they took to higher ground. Amazing. I don't know, people should go and get in contact with them and find out what their ancient traditions taught them concerning all this. We should not lose that knowledge at all, but keep it in mind and be taught this. I'll leave links to all these things. There's various links you could look into. I thought this was very interesting, especially about the Native Americans foretelling and forewarning the whites, the settlers that is, that a flood would come. And I don't know if, I guess nobody ever took their word for it. Where would they go? So I'll leave links below for you for this. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.